All right, so if you ever like swirled a glass of wine
Uh-huh.
and wondered about how it actually got in the glass,
Yeah,
like the journey from grape to glass,
absolutely.
today we're doing a deep dive into wine fermenters,
Okay.
the unsung heroes of the
Yes.
winemaking process. And to do this, we're using these awesome career guides
Mm-hmm.
from RoleCatcher.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, those are great resources.
Yeah, have you seen these before?
I have. I've looked through those guides. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, they're really in depth, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
But yeah, so wine fermenters, they're kind of behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, they really are. I mean, most people, when they think about wine, they think about
Right.
drinking it or the vineyards or maybe even the bottling. But a lot of people don't realize how much meticulous work goes on
Right.
behind the scenes to actually ferment the wine. And that's where a wine fermenter
Yeah.
or a tank tender, as they're often called, comes in.
Oh, tank tender.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's a very evocative name.
It is. It's precise. Like,
Yeah.
it gets to what they actually do.
For sure. And these guides really capture like the hands-on nature of this job.
Yes.
They're not just like, watching over giant tanks. They're literally getting their hands dirty.
Yeah.
They are lifting, monitoring. These guides don't shy away from the physical demands of this role.
Yeah.
You need
some muscles.
more than a passion for Pinot Noir. You got to be able to
For sure.
lift some heavy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, but I feel like that's part of the appeal
Yeah.
for the right person, right?
Absolutely.
Like that connection to the product,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sights, the smells, like you're really in it.
For sure. It's a far cry from a desk job.
Yeah.
For sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But speaking of the ins and outs of this job,
Yeah.
these guides get into some of the nitty-gritty
Uh-huh.
of like preventing bacteria growth,
Oh, yeah.
which sounds like a constant battle.
It's a huge part of the job.
What are some of the things that could go wrong?
Oh, man. Where do we even begin? I mean, imagine this. You've got thousands of gallons of fermenting juice. It's like the perfect environment for all sorts of microbes to grow.
Right.
And not all of them are welcome to the party.
Right. Like
One particularly nasty one is a bacteria called Acetobacter,
Acetobacter.
which turns wine into vinegar.
Oh, no.
And that's not exactly the bouquet you're going for.
No, not at all.
So-
like a whole tank could turn to vinegar.
It's possible, and it illustrates why wine fermenters are so meticulous about sanitation.
Right.
And we're talking surgical levels of cleanliness here.
Okay.
Everything from the tanks themselves to the hoses, the pumps, everything has to be impeccably sanitized.
So how do they go about doing that? Is it like bleach and,
Yeah.
elbow grease?
It's a little more nuanced than that. I mean, while maintaining a sterile environment is definitely critical,
Yeah.
wine fermenters, they employed a multi-pronged defense strategy.
Okay.
So they carefully control the temperature.
Okay.
And that needs to be within a specific range for the yeast, the good microbes. To thrive too cold and the fermentation slows down or stalls altogether,
Right.
too warm, and you risk those unwanted bacteria taking over.
So it's like this delicate balance
It's a tightrope walk.
that they're trying
It's a great way to put it.
maintain.
Yeah.
So what is the ideal temperature then?
Well, it depends on the type of wine and the yeast strain. But generally speaking, red wines ferment at a slightly higher temperature,
Okay.
around 70 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
And white wines prefer it a little bit cooler,
Right.
between 50 and 60 degrees.
And they're maintaining this across, these huge tanks
Yeah.
of juice.
It's pretty impressive.
What's the technology involved there?
Well, temperature control systems are key.
Okay.
They use sophisticated sensors and cooling jackets
Oh, wow.
installed around the tanks
Okay.
to keep the temperature stable throughout the entire fermentation process.
So it's not just like in a cellar hoping for the best.
No, not anymore.
Wow.
Technology's come a long way.
That's incredible. It's like they're orchestrating this like
Yeah,
symphony of science and nature.
it's a beautiful thing.
It is, but there's more to it than just the temperature and the sanitation.
Right.
These guides also mention this thing called sensory evaluation,
Yes,
which makes it sound like you need a pretty refined palate to do this job.
you absolutely do. Wine fermenter is like a chef who can also analyze chemical compositions.
Interesting.
So throughout the fermentation process, they're tasting the wine,
Okay.
but not just for enjoyment.
Right.
They're looking for specific markers,
Okay.
those subtle nuances that tell them how the wine is developing.
So it's not just swirling and sniffing for fun.
There's definitely an element of that,
Okay.
but they're also looking for things like sweetness, acidity, tannin levels, all those elements that contribute to the overall balance and character of the wine.
So they're like tasting the symphony then.
That's a great way to put it.
to make sure it all sounds good.
And a skilled wine fermenter can detect even the slightest off flavors, which could indicate a problem with the fermentation process.
So what happens if they detect something that's off?
That's where their expertise really shines. They become detectives,
Okay.
using their knowledge of fermentation science and their sensory skills to identify the root of the problem.
So it really is this blend of like art and science.
You got it.
That's so cool. Now, speaking of expertise,
Yeah.
these guides also lay out this really clear career progression path
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
for wine fermenters. And it seems like you can start
Uh-huh.
from an entry level and go all the way up to like master of fermentation.
Yeah, and what I really appreciate about these guides is that they don't just list like job titles.
Right.
They provide real-world examples of what people at different stages are actually doing.
That's awesome.
So you can really see how the responsibilities and the required skill set evolve as you gain experience.
That's super helpful.
It is.
So for someone just starting out,
Yeah.
what might they expect in their day-to-day?
Well, according to the guides, an entry-level position, often called a cellar assistant or assistant winemaker,
Okay.
involves a lot of hands-on work.
Okay.
We're talking cleaning and sanitizing tanks, assisting with pump overs, monitoring fermentation progress. It's all about learning the ropes,
Right.
mastering the fundamentals.
Yeah, so it's a lot of grunt work,
There's definitely some of that.
but it's good experience.
No, absolutely invaluable experience for someone who's eager to learn.
Right.
It's like an apprenticeship in the art and science of winemaking.
Yeah, and then as they progress to like junior wine fermenter.
So as they move up the ladder,
Yeah.
they take on more responsibility,
Okay.
conducting more complex tasks like yeast additions,
Okay.
temperature adjustments, and even assisting with basic laboratory analysis.
So it's not just following instructions. They're actually
Exactly.
like making decisions.
They're starting to make decisions that directly impact the wine.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So at that point, they really need that strong foundation of the science.
Absolutely. And this is where those additional certifications and training programs mentioned in the guides
Yes.
come into play.
Yeah, because you can't just love wine. You have to like,
Exactly. You got to have the knowledge to back it up.
yeah.
The wine industry is constantly evolving,
Right.
new technologies and techniques emerging all the time.
This is fascinating.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered like the basics of what a wine fermenter does.
Mm,
But what about the path to becoming one?
yeah.
And what are like the challenges and rewards that await those brave souls who choose this career path?
Right.
We'll dive deeper into that right after this.
Sounds good.
So before the break, we were talking about how you can climb that career ladder
Yes.
to become like a master wine fermenter.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that can really help is certifications.
Yeah.
So what are some examples of certifications someone could get?
Well, a big one is the Certified Wine Professional designation.
Okay.
Offered by the Society of Wine Educators. And it covers a really broad range of topics,
Okay.
from like viticulture, which is grape growing, all the way to tasting.
Wow.
But there are also more specialized certifications
Okay.
that focus specifically on fermentation science.
So if you're really serious about like
All right.
being a wine fermenter, that's the one to go for.
Exactly. Those specialized certifications can be a real game changer for your career,
Yeah.
especially if you're aiming for those higher level roles like senior wine fermenter positions.
Right.
Because it shows potential employers that you're not just proficient in the practical aspects of the job,
Right.
but you also deeply understand the theory and the science.
Like you're not just a
Right.
wine fermenter, you're like a wine fermenter scientist.
Exactly. You're a master of fermentation.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But the guides also mention
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes things don't go according to plan.
Oh, yeah. Mother Nature. She has
Yeah.
a mind of her own.
For sure.
It's not always smooth sailing.
What are some curveballs that a wine fermenter might have to deal with?
Oh, man. So many things could go wrong.
Really?
But imagine this. You've carefully monitored the temperature.
Okay.
You've sanitized everything meticulously.
Right.
And the fermentation process is just not taking off as expected.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this is called a stuck fermentation,
Okay.
where the yeast, for whatever reason, just aren't doing their job.
And what causes that?
It could be a number of things.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a simple fix.
Okay.
So maybe the yeast was stored improperly,
Okay.
or the temperature needs a slight adjustment.
Right.
But it could also be something more complex,
Okay.
like an imbalance in the grape juice composition,
Oh, wow.
or even the presence of unexpected microbes.
So they really have to put on their detective hat.
Exactly. They got to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Why is this fermentation stuck?
Right.
And then they have to figure out how to fix it.
And I imagine that could be pretty stressful.
It can be, especially with, an entire batch of wine hanging in the balance.
Right.
You don't want to be the one who's responsible for ruining thousands of gallons of potential wine.
Yeah, no pressure.
Exactly.
Speaking of pressure,
Yeah.
I know from the guides that this is a very,
Yeah.
physically demanding job.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially during harvest.
Harvest is a crazy time.
What should someone expect in terms of,
Yeah.
hours and grid load during that time?
Well, be prepared to work long and irregular hours, including weekends,
Oh, wow.
possibly even overnight shifts.
So it's not for everyone.
Definitely not for people who like their sleep.
But the payoff is you get to make wine.
Yeah, that's a pretty good perk.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier
Sure.
about the sensory evaluation part.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give us some more details about that?
Yeah, so as a wine fermenter, you're not just tasting the wine for fun.
Right.
You're using your senses to evaluate its quality and development. So you're looking for things like the aroma, the taste, the mouthfeel,
Okay.
and you're trying to identify both desirable and undesirable characteristics.
So what are some desirable characteristics in a wine?
Well, it depends on the type of wine.
Right.
But for example, you might be looking for fruity notes like black currant or citrus zest,
Okay.
or maybe some earthy undertones like mushroom or leather,
Oh, wow.
or even some spicy hints of pepper or clove.
It's like this whole other language.
It is. It's like a secret code.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. The guides also mentioned that experience in different wineries,
Yeah,
even internationally, can be a major asset in this field.
It's huge.
Why is that?
Well, the world of wine is incredibly diverse.
Right.
Each region, each winery
Okay.
has its own unique terroir, which refers to the soil, the climate,
Right.
the grape varieties, the
Yeah.
winemaking traditions.
Yeah, for sure.
So gaining experience in different settings would expose you to a wider range of techniques
All right.
and styles.
It's like adding tools to your tool belt.
Exactly.
That makes you more versatile.
More versatile, more knowledgeable,
All right.
more well-rounded.
And it sounds like networking
Yes.
is a huge part of this field.
It's everything.
It is everything.
Winemaking is a collaborative art.
Okay.
It's not something you do alone in a cellar.
Right.
You're constantly interacting with other people,
Yeah.
sharing ideas, learning from each other.
So how would someone go about, breaking into this industry?
Well, the guides emphasize the importance of attending industry events,
Okay.
joining professional organizations, and even reaching out to experienced wine fermenters
Okay.
for informational interviews.
Just to pick their brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of simply being an active participant in the wine community.
Okay.
So that means attending tastings,
Yeah.
volunteering at wineries,
Right.
engaging with winemakers on social media.
That's putting yourself out
So
there.
exactly. Be present, be involved.
Okay, so you've put yourself out there. You've made some connections.
Yeah.
You've got some experience under your belt. Now it's time for the interview.
The moment of truth.
And thankfully, these guides from RoleCatcher have a whole section
I do.
on interview questions.
So helpful.
So helpful. So let's dive into that. Okay, so you've put yourself out there. You've made some connections. You've got some experience under your belt. Now it's time for the interview.
The moment of truth.
And thankfully, these guides from RoleCatcher have a whole section
They do.
on interview questions.
So helpful.
So helpful. So let's dive into that. What are some of the questions that someone might be asked?
Well, you can definitely expect to go beyond, what's your favorite wine?
Yeah.
It's going to be a little more in-depth than that.
Okay.
Be prepared to answer questions like, describe a time you had to troubleshoot a problem during fermentation.
Okay.
Or how would you explain the importance of yeast health to someone who knows nothing about winemaking?
So they're really trying to get at
Yeah.
how you think and how you
Exactly.
communicate these ideas.
It's not enough to just memorize a bunch of facts about wine. You have to be able to articulate your thought process,
Right.
explain complex concepts in a clear and concise way.
Which is why I love that these guides
Yeah.
provide sample answers.
Yes, they're so helpful.
They're so helpful. It's
like having a cheat sheet
it is a cheat sheet.
for your interview.
Totally. Okay, so you've aced the interview.
Yes.
You wowed them with your knowledge of yeast strains and stuck fermentations.
You're it.
You got the job.
Congratulations.
What next? What advice do these guides give for navigating those first few weeks?
Well, first and foremost, be humble.
Okay.
Be eager to learn. Be a team player.
Okay.
Winemaking is a collaborative effort, so a positive attitude
Yeah.
and a collaborative spirit will go a long way.
Be someone who people want to
Exactly.
work with
Be someone you'd want to share a bottle of wine with.
at the end of a long day.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So be humble, work hard. Anything else?
Never stop learning.
Okay.
The wine industry is constantly evolving, so you've got to stay curious.
Yeah.
Attend industry events, read trade publications, never be afraid to ask questions.
That's really a lifelong pursuit.
It really is, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's like this blend of art and science.
The perfect blend.
It really is so cool. Well, cheers to RoleCatcher for providing these awesome guides.
Here's to that.
And cheers to all the wine fermenters out there.
Absolutely.
You guys are the best. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, we'll be diving into a new career path, so stay tuned.